Hi, welcome to my channel and thank you to my subscribers. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. In this video, we are going to see how to add Keycloak as a OIDC identity provider in AWS Cognito. In one of the previous videos, we saw how to add Keycloak as a SAML identity provider in AWS Cognito. So in this video, we are going to use the openidconnect protocol for the federation between Cognito and Keycloak. So before getting into the configuration steps, I will explain the end-to-end flow using this diagram. So when the user tries to access the client application in the browser, the client app will redirect to Cognito using an authorization code grant flow, which is again an OpenID Connect protocol grant. And Cognito will display a login page with a button, and when the user clicks the button, it will initiate a OpenID Connect authorization code grant flow with Keycloak. And then Keycloak will display the login page in the browser, and the user can enter the Keycloak user credentials. And once the credentials are verified by Keycloak in step number 6, it will actually return an authorization code back to Cognito in step 7. And then Cognito can use that authorization code to call the Keycloak token endpoint to get the access token, ID token, and then the user info endpoint to get the user details. And once Cognito gets the user details, it will either create a new profile if a local profile doesn't exist for that user, or it will update the user profile if any attributes are modified. So that's what happens in step 12. And then Cognito will return an authorization code back to the client application in step 13, and the client application can use that authorization code to call the Cognito token endpoint to get the ID and access tokens. And based on the ID token, the client application can verify the user details, and also in using the access token, the client app can verify if the user has permissions to access that particular client application or any specific feature within that client application, and it can either allow or deny access to that user based on the claims present in the ID token and access token. And finally, the client application will display the app to the end user in the browser. Again, it depends on the authorization logic that is built into that client application based on the claims in the ID token and access token. So this is the end-to-end flow of the OpenID Connect federation between Cognito and Keycloak. So now let's get into the configuration screens, and I will quickly explain what I'm going to use to demo this end-to-end configuration. So as expected, we have the AWS management console, and you can register for a free account anytime in AWS. And for the Keycloak, I'm actually using this Cloud IAM website, which offers Keycloak identity and access management as a service. So please remember, you can install Keycloak in your local, like you can deploy it to a Tomcat server, start a Keycloak server in your local. But in the case of an OpenID Connect protocol, you need an internet accessible Keycloak instance. So either you need to deploy a Keycloak instance in some service like EC2, AWS EC2, or somewhere in Azure or GCP, which can be accessed through internet. But in the case of Keycloak, you have this Cloud IAM website where you can actually register a free Keycloak instance. So if you go to this pricing, you can see that they offer a free standard version with a one realm and 100 users. So that's what I'm using right now for this particular demo. I will close this, and I have already logged into my Cloud IAM console. And if you look at here, I have a default instance created here named as blog instance. And if I click this Keycloak console, it will actually ask for the username password, but I have already logged into the console, so it didn't ask for a username password. So for example, if I sign out and then click the Keycloak console, it will ask for my admin username and password. And once I log in, you can see the Keycloak console. So this is the Keycloak instance that I'm going to use, and this is accessible from internet. And we need a Keycloak instance which is accessible from internet for OpenID Connect integration between Cognito and Keycloak, unlike the SAML integration, because SAML federation happens entirely in the browser, whereas in the case of OpenID Connect, if you look at this diagram, there are some API calls that goes from Cognito to Keycloak in step number 8 to get the tokens, ID token and access token. And that is the reason why we need an internet accessible Keycloak instance. So now let's go to the AWS Management Console, Cognito service. Let's create a user pool. I will quickly go through the configuration. Like, I'm just going to use the bare minimum configuration for this user pool. So let's select username here, go to the next screen, leave these things as is, select no MFA. We don't need all these options for the demo. So let's go to the next screen. Let's disable self-registration, all these options. Let's leave these attributes as is, go to the next screen, and let's select this option just to get past this screen. Anyway, we are not going to use this. And let's name this user pool as Cognito Keycloak user pool. And let's use the Cognito hosted UI. And we need to enter a domain name. I'm going to name it as cogkc1. And it's already available. So you can give any name here, like even cogkc2 is fine. Whatever is available, you can use that name. And I'm going to create a client, cogkc client. And I will use the jwt.io as the callback URL and go to the advanced app client settings. And here, let's actually remove the authorization code grant flow and use the implicit grant flow. And I have mentioned this in multiple videos, but I will again repeat it here. The implicit grant flow is deprecated in the latest OAuth spec, and it is not advisable to use it for any of your production applications. And that's why you see this warning here. So don't use the implicit grant flow for any of your integrations. This is only for the purpose of demo, because it is easier to understand the tokens, all those things using implicit grant flow. Otherwise, don't ever use it. So here I will remove this phone and add profile. So we have the OpenID profile email scope. And let's go to the next screen. Here you can review all the configuration settings and create the user pool. So now the user pool got created, and you can check the user pool configurations everywhere. Like you can check all the tabs here, and you can review all the configurations that you entered, all the configuration values that you entered while creating the user pool. But the key value here is the app integration tab. In the app integration tab, you will see the domain name and the client that we created with jwt.io as the callback URL. So now let's go to the Keycloak administration UI screen and start configuring the Cognito OIDC client in this particular Keycloak instance. So in order to configure a new OIDC client in the Keycloak instance, I have already logged into the administration UI, which I showed in the initial part of this video. So let's go to this client's configuration and create a new client. So we need to select OpenID Connect here because we are going to use OpenID Connect. And in the previous video where I showed how to add Keycloak as a SAML identity provider, I used the SAML option. So here it's the OpenID Connect option. Let's name it as Cognito Demo Client. And let's use the same name here and go to next screen. And let's leave all these options as is, like standard flow, all these things. We are not going to use any other grants, so we can just leave the standard options. Actually, there is one more thing. So we are going to use this client authentication. So let's turn it on and go to the next screen. And here we need to give the redirect URL. So this redirect URL will be the Cognito user pool instance domain. So in my case, this is the domain. Like as I showed in the app integration tab, this is my domain. So I need to give this domain name followed by certain like a URL path. So let's look at the Cognito documentation for that. So Cognito user pool OIDC Identity Provider. So if you go to this link, adding OIDC identity providers to your user pool, here you can see the step 1 where it shows what is the redirect URL that we need to specify. So copy this, go back to this console and add it here. Now we need to replace this user pool domain. So copy this domain. So in your case, when you create a new user pool in Cognito, the domain name will be different. So copy the domain name from your user pool, replace it here. So this will be the redirect URI. So when I log in using Keycloak, Keycloak will post an authorization code back to this particular URL. So if you look at this diagram, it happens in step number 7 where Keycloak returns an authorization code back to Cognito. And this is actually a browser redirect. Even though in this diagram it doesn't show that, but it's actually a browser redirect. So go to save button, click the save button. So we are done with the client configuration. You can go through the default settings here. If you want to play around with different configurations here, you can go ahead and do that. But for now, this is the minimum configuration that we need for a OIDC federation between Cognito and Keycloak. So if you go to the credentials, you can see the client secret value, and if you go to the settings, you can see all the other values here. So let's actually create a new user. I already have some users, but I'm going to just create a new user just for the purpose of this demo. So I don't need any of these actions. I'm going to name it as Cognito test user 2, and I will use some dummy email address like @example.com. And first name will be Cognito, last name will be test user 2, and I will create this user. So I have this user here. You can check the first name, last name, all these details, and if you want to modify something, you can modify. You can go to attributes. I have not tried this, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm not going to do that. So we just need these basic attributes for the initial integration. You can always play around with all these options at a later point of time. So I need to set a password for this user. So I'm going to set a password. And let's make it as a permanent password and save. So the password has been configured for this user. The attributes are configured for this user. So we are done with the Keycloak configuration. Now we need to add this Keycloak instance as a OIDC identity provider in Cognito user pool. So go to the sign in experience tab, click add identity provider, select openidconnect identity provider, and give a name here. I'm going to name it as Keycloak, and we need to provide a client ID. So go back to the administration UI, Keycloak administration UI, clients, and this is the demo client that I created. So this is the client ID, copy that, paste it here, and for the client secret, go to credentials tab, copy it, paste it here, and for the profile, for the scopes, enter OpenID profile and email, and for the attribute request method, let's go with post, and for the issuer URL, go back to the Keycloak administration UI, realm settings, and here you can see the OpenID endpoint configuration. Click that and it will open in a new browser. So here you can see the issuer attribute, issuer JSON attribute. So copy that issuer value, go back to the Cognito screen, replace this issuer URL, and let's actually do add the attribute mapping as well. So email will be mapped to the email, and then family name to family name, and given name to given name. So generally these attributes will be same in all the OpenID Connect providers. So that's why you are seeing the same values on both the sides. So the user pool attribute column is the attribute name in this user pool, and the OpenID Connect attribute column is the attribute name that comes from Keycloak. And generally in the case of OpenID Connect, both these values are these attribute names are standard until and unless you create some custom attribute or you try change the default attribute names. So let's add this identity provider. So it got added successfully. Now let's go back to the app integration tab, to the app client name, and if you go to this edit, here you can see Cognito user pool is already enabled, which means this particular application client can be accessed by the native users of Cognito user pool. I am going to enable Keycloak as well, so that even Keycloak users can access this client. And you can verify all the other configurations. Again, we already configured this during the user pool creation, but you can again take a look at it and save changes. So now copy this view hosted UI link, and I'm going to use Mozilla for testing because I don't want to use the same browser, and because there are like already some sessions with AWS Management Console, Keycloak Console, and that will create confusion. That is the reason why I use different browsers for testing, or you can use even an incognito window so that it won't have any cookies. So let's just open this SAML tracer. I just use it for all the network tracing, just for the URL tracing at least. And it is a very handy tool. You can install it in Mozilla browser, or you can use the developer tools from Mozilla browser or from the Chrome browser for tracing all the URLs. So copy that view hosted UI URL that we copied from the Cognito console and enter it. So here you can see the login screen, and this username password that you see here is for the Cognito native user profiles. And we didn't create any native user profile, so anyway we are not worried about this for this particular demo. So now we want to test if the Keycloak integration works. So click this Keycloak button, and it took me to this login screen. So the username that I created was Cognito test user 2 and enter the password. Yes, so I was able to log in successfully, and you can see the ID token here, and you can see all the values in the ID token, the family name test user 2, and the email cognito test user 2 at example.com. The given name is Cognito, and you can even see the all the URLs, that redirects that are happening. Like when I click that Keycloak button, it actually redirected to the Keycloak instance with client ID as Cognito demo client, the redirect URI, OpenID profile email scope, and then when the login was successful, Keycloak redirected back to Cognito with an authorization code. You can see it here, and then Cognito will use this authorization code to get the tokens from Keycloak. That is a backend API call, which you can see in this diagram. So the step 8 and 9 and 10 and 11. So that's what happens here, but it happens in the backend, so you won't see those backend API calls in this browser trace. And then finally, Cognito generated an access token and ID token, which you can see here It's a ID token, and then there is an access token as well, which it doesn't show here, but it's actually there in the URL, and it returns back to jwt.io. So you can see all the values here. So in order to confirm it again, let's go back to the Keycloak administration console, users. Let's actually modify maybe some of the value, like instead of Cognito user 2, I will change it to, like, it's not allowing me to change it. Okay, let's change the name to Cognito first name and last name Cognito last name. Let's save, and I will go back here, clear this. We don't need this anymore. I will close it. I will clear the cookies so that it will again force me to log in. So I'm again accessing that same hosted UI URL, clicking Keycloak, and I already have the credentials saved. So click sign in. Yeah, I can see the latest updates. Test user to last name and Cognito first name. And if you go back to the Cognito user pool console and go to the users tab, you will see a new local profile created for that Keycloak profile. And you can click that user profile and view all the attributes like test user to last name, Cognito first name. So Cognito creates a local profile when the user logged in for the very first time, and then when the user again logged in for the next time, it updated these attribute values to last name, first name. And that's what happens in step number 12 here. So this is how you integrate Keycloak with Cognito using the OpenID protocol. It involves multiple steps like any other identity provider integration. You can always come back and refer to this video if you miss any steps. But if you still face any issues, please feel free to post your questions in the comments section and I will be happy to respond. I hope you enjoyed this video and thank you for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.